My name is Alexandra Mitchell, I'm 31, and I come from a prestigious family of doctors who labeled me the ugly high school grad and disowned me for choosing my own path. 9 years later, I walked into my sister Brittany's lavish wedding uninvited, transformed and successful beyond their wildest dreams. When they tried to humiliate me, they had no idea who I had become. The looks on their faces when they finally realized? Absolutely priceless. Before I dive into the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to family who underestimated you. Trust me, what happens next is something you won't want to miss. Growing up in the Mitchell family meant living under the weight of generations of medical excellence. My mother, Dr. Diana Mitchell, wasn't just any neurosurgeon, she was a pioneering researcher whose name appeared in medical textbooks. My father, Dr. Robert Mitchell, served as chief of cardiology at Massachusetts General, where his grandfather had once been a founding board member. The Mitchell name opened doors in Boston's medical community before you even had a chance to knock. Our home in Beacon Hill resembled a medical museum more than a family residence. Instead of typical family photos, our walls displayed framed medical degrees, awards, and pictures of my parents with various dignitaries at medical galas. Dinner conversations revolved around surgical techniques and medical breakthroughs rather than normal family matters. My sister Brittany, 2 years older, embodied everything my parents valued. With her perfect features, flawless skin, and natural academic brilliance, she was the golden child. While I struggled through organic chemistry, Brittany effortlessly graduated summa cum laude from her pre-med program. Her beauty queen looks combined with her academic prowess made her the pride of the Mitchell name. Alexandra, why can't you apply yourself like your sister? Became the soundtrack of my childhood. Every report card, every school function became another opportunity to highlight how I failed to measure up to the Mitchell standard. I tried, God knows I tried. I stayed up studying until my eyes burned. I joined the science club and entered the state science fair 3 years running. But where Brittany had natural talent, I had to fight for every A-. And each time I brought home anything less than perfection, my mother's disapproving glare made me shrink a little more. By age 12, I discovered my own passion, business and entrepreneurship. I started a small dog walking service in our neighborhood that quickly grew to 15 clients. I kept meticulous books, created marketing flyers, and even hired 2 friends to help when demand exceeded what I could handle alone. I was proud of my little enterprise that earned me nearly $200 weekly until my mother discovered how I spent my afternoons. Dog walking? Like some common laborer, she scoffed during dinner. Mitchells heal people, Alexandra. We don't pick up after animals for pocket change. My father lowered his medical journal just enough to add, "This business nonsense is distracting you from your studies. Pre-med requires focus." I tried explaining the principles I'd learned about supply and demand, customer retention, and profit margins. But my mother cut me off with a wave of her manicured hand. "Save the merchant talk for the shopkeepers, Alexandra. It's beneath you." My appearance became another battleground. Where Brittany had our mother's elegant features and slim build, I took after my father's side with a rounder face and stockier frame. Nothing about me seemed to satisfy my mother. "Stand up straight, Alexandra. No one will take a slouching doctor seriously," she'd say, pushing my shoulders back painfully. "Or, perhaps if you did something with your hair, people would notice your eyes instead." These comments usually came right before important family gatherings, ensuring I'd feel self-conscious throughout. High school intensified the divide. Brittany had graduated as valedictorian and moved on to Johns Hopkins, where she continued collecting accolades. Meanwhile, I excelled in economics and business studies, but struggled with the advanced science courses my parents insisted I take. The family narrative was established. Brittany was the beautiful genius following in our parents' footsteps, while I was the plain underachiever who couldn't quite grasp her birthright. At family events, relatives would gush over Brittany's latest achievements, then turn to me with pitying smiles and ask, "Still figuring things out, Alexandra?" By senior year, I had secretly applied to business programs instead of the pre-med track my parents assumed I would follow. I maintained good grades across all subjects, but my passion for entrepreneurship only grew stronger. I started an online business selling custom study planners that gained popularity across several high schools in Boston. Yet I kept this success hidden from my family, knowing they would dismiss it as trivial. My high school graduation should have been a celebration. Instead, it became the first step toward my exile from the Mitchell family, as I accepted my diploma, graduating with honors. Though not at the top of my class like Brittany, I looked out to see my mother checking her watch and my father reviewing patient files on his phone. Neither looked up when my name was called. After my high school graduation ceremony, my parents hosted a dinner at our home, ostensibly to celebrate my achievement. In reality, it was another opportunity to parade the Mitchell medical legacy before extended family. My grandmother had flown in from Chicago, and several of my parents' colleagues were present with their children, all medical students or doctors themselves. The dining room gleamed with fine china and crystal that my mother reserved for important occasions, though I suspected my graduation alone wouldn't have qualified. My father stood at the head of the table, raising his glass for a toast. To Alexandra, who graduates today and begins her journey toward becoming the newest Dr. Mitchell this fall at Harvard Medical School, pending her acceptance, of course. My stomach clenched. They had assumed no, decided my future without any input from me. The early admission letter from Wharton Business School burned in my pocket where I'd been carrying it for courage. This was my moment to stand up for myself, to declare my own path. Actually, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I've decided to study business at Wharton. I was accepted with a partial scholarship. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. My father's smile calcified into something hard and unfamiliar. Brittany, home from medical school for the occasion, smirked into her water glass. That's an unusual joke, Alexandra, my mother finally said, her voice tight. Perhaps save the humor for after dinner. It's not a joke, I replied, pulling out the acceptance letter. I've been interested in business for years. This is what I want to do. My father's face darkened to a dangerous crimson. Put that away, he hissed through clenched teeth. We'll discuss this privately. But my mother had already snatched the letter from my hands, her eyes scanning it with increasing fury. This is unacceptable, she sputtered. No Mitchell has ever been in trade. We're healers, not shopkeepers. Business isn't just shopkeeping, Mother. I want to revolutionize healthcare administration. Make hospitals more efficient, patient care more. Enough. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal jump. You've embarrassed us enough for one evening. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister and another surgeon, leaned toward my grandmother with a stage whisper. Always was an odd one. Not the Mitchell material, if you know what I mean. My cousin Thomas, already in his residency at 24, gave me a pitying look. Medicine isn't for everyone, I suppose. Some people just don't have the intellectual capacity. The dinner deteriorated from there. My parents maintained icy politeness until the guests departed, but I could feel the storm building. As soon as the door closed behind the last visitor, my mother rounded on me. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you make such a spectacle? Do you have any idea what people will say? The Mitchell's daughter, peddling wares instead of saving lives. I'm not going to be peddling wares, I tried to explain. Business school teaches. I don't care what it teaches, she shouted, her composure finally shattering. No daughter of mine will waste her life chasing money instead of making a difference in this world. My father, always more controlled than my mother, adjusted his glasses. Alexandra, let me be clear. The Mitchell family has paid for generations of medical education. We will not fund some commercial venture. If you persist in this foolishness, you will do so without our financial support. Fine, I said, fighting back tears. I have a scholarship, and I'll work for the rest. It's more than money, my mother cut in. It's our name, our reputation. If you choose this path, you choose to do so as someone other than a Mitchell. Brittany, who had been watching with barely concealed satisfaction, finally spoke. "You always were the ugly duckling of the family, Alex. Not pretty enough, not smart enough for medicine. Maybe selling things is more your level." That hurt more than anything my parents had said. Brittany and I had once been close, before academic competition and our parents' blatant favoritism drove us apart. Her casual cruelty revealed how thoroughly she had absorbed our parents' values. "Family meeting. Tomorrow morning," my father announced. "We'll settle this then. I suggest you reconsider your position overnight, Alexandra." I barely slept. By morning, I had packed a small suitcase, just in case. I knew my parents, knew their rigidity and pride. Still, some childish part of me hoped they would listen, would try to understand my dreams. The family meeting was held in my father's study, a room designed to intimidate with its dark woods, leather furnishings, and walls of medical texts. My parents sat behind the massive desk like judges, with Brittany perched smugly on a side chair. I stood before them, feeling like a defendant at trial. "We've discussed the situation," my father began without preamble, "and we've reached a decision. Either you commit to medical school immediately, or you are no longer welcome in this house or this family." The finality in his voice made my knees weak. "You're disowning me? Over my choice of career?" "Don't be dramatic," my mother said coldly. "We're giving you a choice. The right choice should be obvious to anyone with your advantages." "I want to follow my own path," I said, my voice breaking. "Why is that so hard to accept?" My mother's laugh was brittle. "Your own path? Look at yourself, Alexandra. You're nothing special. Not particularly beautiful, not exceptionally brilliant. The Mitchell name is the only extraordinary thing about you. Without it, what do you imagine you'll achieve?" Each word landed like a physical blow. I had always known I wasn't the favorite, but the naked contempt in her voice revealed the full truth to them. I had no value beyond my potential to extend the family legacy. "I'd rather be ordinary and happy than miserable in a profession I hate," I managed to say. My father opened a drawer and removed some papers. "Then you leave me no choice. I've already instructed my lawyer to remove you from my will. The trust fund established for your education will be dissolved. You have until this evening to remove your belongings." Brittany's eyes widened slightly. Even she seemed shocked by the speed and finality of their decision. But she recovered quickly. "Well, that's settled then," she said with a small, cruel smile. "I always wanted a single-child family anyway." I stood there, tears streaming down my face. As my father signed the papers with his Mont Blanc pen, the same pen he'd used to sign thousands of prescriptions. With the same clinical detachment, he was writing me out of their lives. "Don't call yourself a Mitchell anymore," my mother said, standing to signal the end of the meeting. "You've rejected everything the name stands for." I walked out of the study in a daze. Upstairs, I finished packing what I could carry: clothes, a few books, my laptop. As I zipped the suitcase, Brittany appeared in my doorway. "You could just give in, you know," she said, inspecting her manicure. "Tell them you've reconsidered. They'd forgive you eventually." I looked at my sister, beautiful, accomplished, and utterly devoid of compassion. "Would you want me to live your life if you hated every minute of it?" She shrugged. "Better than being a nobody." That afternoon, I left the only home I'd ever known with $200 in my wallet, a suitcase of belongings, and a broken heart. As the taxi pulled away from Beacon Hill, I didn't know if I'd ever see my family again. What I did know was that I would either succeed on my own terms or fail trying. Either way, I would never again let someone else define my worth. The first weeks after being disowned were a blur of panic and exhaustion. With my family's financial support abruptly cut off and my partial scholarship insufficient to cover both tuition and living expenses, I had to defer my admission to Wharton. The prestigious business school that had once represented my dreams now seemed like a distant fantasy. I called the only friend I trusted completely, Stephanie Carter, whose parents had always treated me with more warmth than my own. "Stay as long as you need," she offered without hesitation. Her tiny apartment became my temporary haven, her couch my bed for what stretched into 3 long months. Finding work proved harder than expected. Without a college degree, my options were limited. I eventually cobbled together 3 part-time jobs: morning shifts at a coffee shop, afternoon receptionist work at a small accounting firm, and weekend hours at a retail store. Between jobs, I collapsed on Stephanie's couch, too exhausted to even cry about my situation. "You're working yourself to death," Stephanie observed one night as I counted my meager savings. "There has to be a better way." "I need to save enough for state college," I explained. "If I can't go to Wharton, I'll start smaller. I just need a foot in the door." By fall, I had saved enough to enroll at Massachusetts State University with additional student loans. I couldn't afford to live on campus, so I found a tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood with bars on the windows and unreliable heating. The 40-minute bus ride to campus became my study time. That first semester, I took maximum credits while continuing to work nearly full-time. I survived on ramen noodles and determination, often studying until my eyes couldn't focus. When other students complained about their workload, I remained silent. They couldn't comprehend what it meant to have absolutely no safety net. During my business management course, I caught the attention of Professor Williams, a former venture capitalist who had turned to teaching after a successful career. After I submitted a particularly insightful analysis of healthcare industry inefficiencies, he asked me to stay after class. "This perspective is unusual," he said, tapping my paper. "Most students analyze from the profit angle only. You're considering patient outcomes and provider satisfaction alongside financial metrics." I explained my background briefly, careful not to reveal my family connection. "Healthcare is broken in ways that aren't just financial," I said. "The administrative burdens on medical professionals reduce the time they can spend on patient care." Professor Williams became my mentor, guiding my coursework toward healthcare management and technology. He recognized what my family never had, that my outside perspective on medicine might be valuable precisely because I wasn't embedded in its traditions. "The best innovations often come from industry outsiders," he told me. "They see problems long-timers have normalized." By my junior year, I had developed the initial concept for what would eventually become my company, a software platform that streamlined administrative tasks for medical professionals while improving patient data integration. The idea came from watching my parents and sister complain about paperwork taking time away from patients. Ironically, the very family that had rejected me provided the insight for my future success. I graduated at the top of my class, despite working throughout college. The night of graduation, I sat alone in my improved, but still modest apartment, surrounded by textbooks and business plans instead of family. I allowed myself one evening of self-pity before refocusing on the path ahead. Professor Williams helped me secure a small business loan with his personal guarantee. "I've invested in dozens of companies," he said. "None had a founder as determined as you." The early days of my startup were brutal. I worked from a shared incubator space, sleeping on a futon in the corner to save rent money. Initial pitches to investors met with rejection after rejection. "Healthcare is too regulated for disruption," one venture capitalist told me dismissively. "You don't have the industry connections to penetrate hospital systems," said another. Each rejection fueled my determination. I refined my prototype, recruited 2 brilliant programmers with equity offers, and targeted smaller clinics that bigger tech companies ignored. Slowly, we built a client base and collected data proving our system reduced administrative time by 34% while decreasing billing errors by 27%. 2 years into the struggle, we experienced our breakthrough. A mid-sized hospital group facing financial pressure agreed to pilot our system. Within 6 months, their administrative costs dropped significantly while patient satisfaction scores rose. They became our champions, introducing us to larger healthcare networks. Our first major investor came on board after witnessing this success, a healthcare-focused venture fund that offered $2 million for a 15% stake. The validation was as valuable as the capital. With proper funding, we expanded our team and enhanced our product. Throughout this period, I lived as if bankruptcy were just around the corner. While my company, MedTech Innovations, began to gain industry recognition, I continued to live in the same apartment, drive the same used car, and work the same punishing hours. The financial insecurity of my early independence had left deep marks. Stephanie remained my emotional anchor. "When will you acknowledge you're actually succeeding?" she asked after a particularly good quarter. "You've proven them wrong already." But it wasn't about proving my family wrong anymore. Somewhere in the struggle, my motivation had shifted from spite to genuine passion. I believed in what we were building, a system that made healthcare more humane for both providers and patients. As success mounted, I began working with a therapist to process the family trauma I'd been suppressing. "Your achievements won't heal the wound of their rejection," Dr. Lawson warned me. "That requires different work." She was right. Despite creating a company valued at 8 figures, despite the industry recognition and growing financial security, I still woke from dreams where my mother called me worthless, where my father signed me away with his Mont Blanc pen. External success couldn't heal internal wounds, but it gave me the resources to begin that healing journey. For years after being disowned, I had transformed from a desperate, couch-surfing reject to the CEO of a promising healthcare technology company. I had proven I could survive without the Mitchell name or money. What I hadn't yet confronted was whether I could thrive while carrying the weight of their rejection. That reckoning still awaited me. 5 years after walking out of my childhood home, MedTech Innovations had evolved from a struggling startup into a healthcare industry disruptor. Our patient management system was being implemented in hospital networks across the country, with a client retention rate that made our competitors envious. The software I had conceptualized as a college student was now saving hospitals millions while improving clinical outcomes, exactly the fusion of business acumen and healthcare impact I had tried to explain to my dismissive parents years before. After a major hospital conglomerate acquired our system for their 83 facilities, our company valuation soared past $500 million. I remained the majority shareholder, with Professor Williams and our early employees holding significant stakes. Financial publications began taking notice, with Forbes featuring me in their 30 Under 30 list for healthcare innovation. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been cast out for refusing to become a doctor. Yet I was now influencing healthcare on a scale no single physician could achieve. Our software had reduced medication errors by 43% across implemented systems and freed up an average of 72 minutes per clinical provider daily, time returned to patient care rather than paperwork. With financial security came physical transformation. No longer running between multiple jobs or subsisting on ramen, I could afford proper nutrition and regular exercise with a personal trainer. The stressed, exhausted girl who left home had been replaced by a confident woman who maintained her health as carefully as her business plans. I invested in a wardrobe that communicated success without ostentation, learned to manage my naturally wavy hair instead of fighting it, and found a subtle makeup routine that enhanced rather than masked my features. These weren't changes made to meet my mother's impossible standards, but choices that made me feel comfortable in professional settings where appearance unfortunately still influenced credibility. "You've blossomed," Stephanie remarked during a rare dinner when our schedules aligned. "It's not just the outside, though that's stunning too. You carry yourself differently." She was right. Success had given me something my family never had, the confidence to be authentically myself. Without the constant measurement against Brittany's perfection, I had discovered my own strengths: strategic thinking, empathetic leadership, and relentless problem-solving. As the company grew, so did media interest in its founder. Business journals requested profiles, and industry publications sought interviews about healthcare innovation. Inevitably, questions about my background arose. "Your insights into medical systems are unusually nuanced for someone without clinical training," one interviewer observed. "Where does that perspective come from?" I developed a carefully constructed answer that acknowledged my familiarity with healthcare environments without mentioning my family. I grew up surrounded by medical professionals. I would say, I observed both their dedication and their frustrations with systems that hindered rather than helped their work. It wasn't a lie, but it allowed me to maintain the privacy I valued. I had no interest in publicly discussing the family that had discarded me, either to criticize them or to leverage their name for credibility. My success would stand on its own merits. Occasionally, distant relatives or family acquaintances would reach out after recognizing my name in business publications. "Your parents would be so proud," they would write, unaware of the estrangement. I never responded to these messages, unwilling to either perpetuate the lie or expose the painful truth. My personal life, which had been sacrificed to survival and then to building the company, gradually expanded to include more than work. I developed deep friendships with fellow entrepreneurs who understood the unique pressures of leadership. I volunteered with organizations supporting first-generation college students, recognizing in them the same determination that had carried me through my darkest days. And then I met Michael. He was a pediatrician at Boston Children's Hospital, where we were implementing our system. Unlike other doctors who viewed our team with suspicion, Michael approached the technology with curious enthusiasm. "This will let me spend more time with my patients and less time clicking boxes," he said during training. "That's worth its weight in gold." Our professional interactions evolved into coffee discussions, then dinners, then weekends together. Michael's compassion extended beyond his young patients to everyone in his orbit. With him, I found myself sharing pieces of my past I had locked away, including the family that had deemed me unworthy. "They threw away someone incredible," he said simply after hearing the full story. "That reveals everything about them and nothing about you." Michael's warmth helped heal wounds I had carried for years. With him, I began to imagine a future that included marriage and perhaps children, a family created on foundations of acceptance rather than conditional approval. Yet whenever these conversations arose, I felt a lingering hesitation. "You still believe you're unworthy of happiness," Dr. Lawson observed during therapy. "Part of you accepted their judgment that you were less valuable." She was right. Despite external success, I hadn't fully rejected the internal narrative my family had written. Complete healing would require confronting the past I had carefully avoided. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Browsing through a society magazine in a salon waiting area, I froze at a familiar name. Brittany Mitchell was featured in the engagement announcements, her perfect smile beaming beside her fiancé, Dr. James Richardson, described as a rising star in medical technology implementation. The wedding was scheduled at the Rosewood Hotel in Boston, just 6 weeks away. My heart raced as I read the details. James Richardson, I knew that name. He was the physician lead for technology integration at Massachusetts General, one of our biggest clients. Though we had never met personally, his team worked directly with our implementation specialists on a system-wide overhaul. "Is this something you want to attend?" Michael asked when I showed him the announcement. "You could request an invitation." The thought made me physically ill. "They wouldn't want me there." "Maybe not," he agreed. "But do you need closure? Would seeing them help you finally move beyond their shadow?" After discussing it extensively with Dr. Lawson, I made my decision. I wouldn't ask permission to attend my sister's wedding. I would simply appear not to create a scene, but to finally confront the past that still haunted me. After 9 years of absence, I would return to face the family that had once declared me worthless. "Just remember," Michael cautioned as he helped me select an appropriately elegant dress for the occasion. "You're not going to get their approval and you don't need it. You're going for yourself." As the wedding date approached, I prepared myself emotionally for the confrontation to come. I was no longer the devastated teenager they had cast out. I was Alexandra Mitchell, CEO of a company revolutionizing the very profession they had insisted was the only worthy path. Whatever happened at the Rosewood Hotel, I would finally be facing my family as their equal, or perhaps, though they wouldn't know it yet, as someone who had already surpassed them. The Rosewood Hotel glittered with elegant sophistication on the evening of Brittany's wedding. Valets handled a procession of luxury vehicles while doormen ushered guests in formal attire through the grand entrance. I sat in my car across the street, watching the scene unfold with a racing heart. "You don't have to do this," I whispered to myself, gripping the steering wheel. 9 years of absence had culminated in this moment of decision. I could drive away, continue building my successful life without this confrontation. Yet some deep part of me knew Dr. Lawson was right. Without facing my past, I could never fully claim my future. I checked my appearance one final time in the rearview mirror. The woman who looked back bore little resemblance to the awkward teenager who had left home with a single suitcase. My hair fell in soft waves around a face that had matured into its features. The designer dress I'd chosen was understated but unmistakably expensive, projecting confident success without trying too hard. Taking a deep breath, I handed my keys to the valet and walked toward the entrance with practiced poise. The reception was being held in the grand ballroom, according to the elegant sign in the lobby. I followed the flow of guests, my invitation the confidence in my walk and the quality of my attire. The ballroom was transformed into a vision of white orchids and crystal, with hundreds of guests already mingling before the bride's arrival. I recognized several distant relatives and family friends, though none immediately noticed me. Moving to a less conspicuous position near a floral arrangement, I observed the crowd. That's when I spotted my mother. Dr. Diana Mitchell stood in a circle of admiring guests, accepting congratulations on her daughter's marriage into another prestigious medical family. She had aged noticeably, with deeper lines around her mouth and eyes, though her posture remained imperiously straight. My father stood nearby, silver-haired and distinguished in his tuxedo, looking exactly like the patriarch he had always aspired to be. A flurry of activity at the entrance indicated the bride's arrival. Conversations hushed as Brittany made her dramatic entrance on our father's arm. She was stunning in a couture gown that emphasized her slender figure. Her hair swept up to showcase the family diamonds at her throat. Her expression held the serene satisfaction of someone who has followed the expected path and received all the promised rewards. I remained unnoticed through the ceremonial entrance and initial toasts. It was only when guests began to circulate again that an elderly great-aunt did a double-take as she passed me. "Alexandra?" she questioned, adjusting her glasses. "Alexandra Mitchell? Is that you, dear?" Before I could respond, my mother's head snapped in our direction with radar-like precision. Her eyes widened. First in confusion, then in horrified recognition. She abandoned her conversation mid-sentence and cut through the crowd toward us with determined speed. "Why is this defect here?" she hissed when she reached us, her voice low but venomous. "You're not welcome." Great Aunt Harriet retreated in confusion as my mother gripped my arm with surprising strength, attempting to steer me toward the exit. I gently but firmly removed her hand. "Hello, Mother," I said calmly. "You're looking well." Her eyes swept over me, taking in the subtle signs of success, the confident posture, the quality of my dress, the healthy glow that had replaced the stressed pallor of my youth. For a fleeting second, confusion crossed her face before hardening back into anger. "Security," she called to a nearby staff member. "We have an uninvited guest." The commotion attracted attention, including Brittany's. My sister pushed through curious onlookers, her wedding gown rustling as she approached. Her expression shifted from bride's joy to cold fury when she saw me. "You are not invited," she stated flatly. "How dare you try to ruin my day?" "I'm not here to ruin anything," I replied. "I simply came to congratulate you." "After 9 years of silence?" she scoffed. "You disappeared without a word, and now you crash my wedding?" "Security, please remove her." A hotel security officer approached hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. As he reached for my elbow, another voice cut through the growing tension. "Stop right there." A tall, distinguished man in a perfectly tailored tuxedo strode toward us. Dr. James Richardson, Brittany's new husband, looked from me to my sister in apparent confusion. "What's happening here?" he asked, his brow furrowed. Just removing an uninvited guest, darling, Brittany said sweetly, taking his arm. Nothing to worry about. James studied my face more carefully, a strange recognition dawning in his eyes. Wait a minute, he said slowly. Aren't you? No one important, my mother interrupted. Just a former family acquaintance who misunderstood the invitation list. How dare you? James exclaimed, his voice rising with indignation. This woman is… You have no idea, do you? I interjected with a calm smile, making direct eye contact with Brittany. The crowd around us had grown, with guests openly watching the drama unfold. Several had phones partially raised, ready to capture whatever came next. Brittany's confidence faltered slightly. What are you talking about? My father pushed through the crowd, joining the confrontation with a thunderous expression. Alexandra, you will leave immediately, he commanded in the authoritative tone that had once made me tremble. Before I go, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the now hushed ballroom, perhaps you should know who you're throwing out. James looked from me to my family in growing confusion. Would someone please explain what's happening? Why are you treating Alexandra Mitchell this way? The use of my full name sent a visible shock through the assembled guests. My mother's face paled. You know this person? She asked her new son-in-law. Know her? James looked incredulous. Of course I know her. Everyone in healthcare technology knows Alexandra Mitchell. She's the founder and CEO of MedTech Innovations. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several of the medical professionals present clearly recognized the company name, their expressions changing from entertainment to surprise. That's impossible, my father said dismissively. Alexandra has nothing to do with medicine or technology. James laughed in disbelief. Sir, with all due respect, MedTech's systems have revolutionized patient care across the country. Their software runs in over 200 hospitals, including Massachusetts General, where both you and I practice. The color drained from my father's face as the implications sank in. My mother looked from James to me, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and the first flickers of calculation. Alexandra, she said, her tone suddenly warm as she reached for my hand. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. Of course you're welcome at your sister's wedding. I gently sidestepped her attempt at physical contact. Is that so? A moment ago, I was a defect to be removed. Smartphones were openly recording now, the wealthy crowd of doctors and socialites unable to resist the unfolding drama. Brittany looked mortified, her perfect day derailing before her eyes. Could we discuss this privately? My father suggested, glancing nervously at the onlookers. I think we're well past privacy, I replied. 9 years ago, you made it very clear that I was no longer part of this family because I chose business over medicine. You said I would amount to nothing without the Mitchell name behind me. I turned to address the gathered crowd directly. What none of you knew was that the Mitchells disowned their younger daughter for daring to follow a different path. They threw me out with nothing but a suitcase and told me never to use the family name again. The shocked gasps from the audience were audible. Several older guests looked distinctly uncomfortable, while others seemed morbidly fascinated by this unscheduled entertainment. Well, I continued, turning back to my stunned family, I kept my promise. I built my company and my reputation without trading on the Mitchell name or connections. And yet, ironically, my work has probably done more for patient care than many individual physicians will achieve in their careers. Brittany was staring at me with an unreadable expression, somewhere between anger and bewilderment. James still looked confused, glancing between his new wife and me as if trying to reconcile conflicting realities. I think, he said slowly, we have a great deal to discuss. The confrontation had moved from the main ballroom to a private anteroom, though nothing about the situation felt private anymore. Videos of our encounter were undoubtedly circulating among guests' social networks, and whispers followed us as hotel staff escorted our small group away from the reception. James Richardson looked shell-shocked as he loosened his bow tie and sank into a chair. Let me understand this correctly, he said, looking between me and my family. Your sisters? And you haven't spoken in 9 years because they disowned you for studying business instead of medicine? My mother attempted to regain control of the narrative. James, dear. Family matters are complex. Alexandra made certain choices that led to her creating the software system our entire hospital network depends on, James interrupted. The same system that saved Mass General from bankruptcy 3 years ago when Medicare reimbursements were slashed. My father's head snapped up. What are you talking about? James looked at him incredulously. The hospital was losing millions on inefficient administrative processes and billing errors. Medtecha's system reduced overhead by 27% in the first year of implementation. The board considers it the single most important operational decision of the decade. He turned to me. Which is why I've been trying to meet you for months. I had no idea you were related to Brittany. We're not related, my mother said coldly. Alexandra rejected our family. Actually, I corrected, you rejected me. You said I was no longer a Mitchell because I wouldn't follow your prescribed path. Brittany had remained uncharacteristically quiet. Her perfect wedding makeup slightly smudged from angry tears. You could have reached out, she finally said. In 9 years, you never once called. Would you have answered? I asked simply. Her silence was answer enough. The door opened and an older gentleman in a tailored suit entered. I recognized him immediately as Dr. Harold Winters, chairman of the hospital board at Massachusetts General. His eyes widened when he saw me. Ms. Mitchell, what a surprise to see you here. He looked around the tense room, sensing the atmosphere. Is everything all right? Dr. Winters, James said, standing. Did you know Alexandra is Dr. Robert Mitchell's daughter? The chairman looked confused. Of course he stopped, looking more carefully between my father and me. Wait, you're that Mitchell? The one who? His voice trailed off as understanding dawned. Good God, the anonymous donor is you? Now it was my turn to be surprised. I had made significant charitable donations to several hospitals implementing our systems, including a major gift to Massachusetts General's Technology Modernization Fund. I had done so anonymously, not wanting my family connections to become public. You're the $15 million donor, my father asked incredulously. The one who funded the pediatric technology wing. Dr. Winters nodded, looking increasingly uncomfortable. The board has been trying to persuade Ms. Mitchell to allow us to recognize her generosity publicly for years. She's insisted on anonymity. He gave me an apologetic look. I had no idea about your family situation. The room fell silent as my parents absorbed this information. My mother's face underwent a remarkable transformation, calculation replacing hostility as she reassessed the daughter she had discarded. Alexandra, she said, her voice suddenly warm and maternal. Clearly there have been misunderstandings. We've always been proud of you, of course. Perhaps it's time we put the past behind us and reunited as a family. The transparent insincerity made my stomach turn. 9 years of silence. And now, learning of my success and wealth, she wanted to reunite as if nothing had happened. That's not going to happen, I said quietly but firmly. I didn't come here seeking reconciliation or revenge. I came for closure. I reached into my clutch and removed a folded paper, a letter I had written years ago during therapy but never sent. Dr. Lawson suggested I express what your rejection did to me, even if you never read it. Since we're all here, I might as well share it now. The room grew still as I unfolded the letter and began to read. Dear family, when you disowned me, you didn't just cut me off financially. You confirmed the message you had been sending my entire life, that my worth was conditional. That I was lovable only if I followed your predetermined path. That who I was, at my core, wasn't enough. For years, I believed you. I internalized the idea that I was inherently deficient, not pretty enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough of unconditional love. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to prove my value, first to you, then to the world, and finally to myself. What I've come to understand is that the deficiency was never in me. It was in your narrow definition of success, your inability to see value in different paths, and your withholding of love as a control mechanism. A parent's job is to help their child become the best version of themselves, not to force them into a predetermined mold. I don't hate you anymore. That's too exhausting. Instead, I've learned to be the parent to myself that you never were, supportive, accepting, and proud of my authentic journey. The company I've built does meaningful work that helps millions of patients and thousands of medical professionals, including, ironically, the very hospital where you practice. I didn't build it to spite you. I built it because it was the work I was meant to do. The fact that you couldn't see that possibility says everything about your limitations, nothing about mine. I refolded the letter and returned it to my clutch. The room remained silent. Several of the wedding guests who had followed us, board members and hospital administrators who recognized the significance of what was unfolding, looked deeply uncomfortable. Brittany was the first to speak, her voice uncharacteristically small. I didn't know they treated you that way. I knew they favored me, but... She looked down at her wedding gown, then back at me. I was jealous of you, you know. Jealous? Of me? I couldn't hide my surprise. You had the courage to defy them, she said. To choose your own path. I've been following their blueprint my entire life, terrified of disappointing them the way you supposedly did. Her laugh held no humor. And look how it turned out. You're changing healthcare while I'm just another surgeon in the family line. My father cleared his throat. Alexandra, clearly we misjudged your potential. The Mitchell family has always valued excellence, which you've obviously achieved. Perhaps it's time to bring you back into the fold, restore your inheritance and position. I looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. The mighty Dr. Robert Mitchell suddenly seemed smaller, diminished by the revelation that his discarded daughter had achieved more influence in his field than he had. I don't need your fold, I said gently. I've built my own. I don't need your inheritance, I've created my own wealth. And I certainly don't need your approval, which seems to be available only now that I've proven financially successful. My mother began to protest, but I raised my hand to stop her. I didn't come here to hurt you or embarrass you. I came because I needed to face this final demon, the fear that I truly was worthless without your approval. Standing here now, I can finally see the truth. I was never the defective one in this family. James stepped forward, looking between Brittany and me. I had no idea about any of this, he said. Brittany never mentioned having a sister. Because they conditioned me to erase her, Brittany admitted, tears now flowing freely. To pretend she never existed, like some family shame. She looked at me with genuine regret. I'm sorry, Alex. I was cruel to you. I participated in their rejection because it made me the good daughter by comparison. I nodded, acknowledging her apology without yet accepting it. 9 years of silence couldn't be erased with a single expression of remorse. I think, I said, gathering my clutch, it's time for me to go. This is still your wedding day, Brittany. I truly do wish you happiness. As I turned to leave, James stopped me. Wait. You should know that I sought out the connection with MedTech specifically because I wanted to meet you. Your reputation in the field is extraordinary. The innovation you've brought to healthcare administration has done more good than you might realize. I smiled slightly. Thank you, James. Perhaps we can have that meeting after your honeymoon. Professionally speaking, of course. My parents watched in stunned silence as I walked toward the door. The powerful Mitchells, who had once cast me out with casual cruelty, now seemed diminished, revealed as small people whose conditional love and rigid expectations had cost them a daughter. Dr. Winters followed me into the hallway. Ms. Mitchell, Alexandra, I hope this unfortunate revelation won't affect your relationship with the hospital. Your contributions have been invaluable. The hospital's mission is separate from my family drama, I assured him. My commitment to improving patient care hasn't changed. As I walked through the hotel lobby, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation hadn't gone as expected. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful family embrace. Instead, there had been something more valuable. Truth. The truth that I had succeeded not despite being cast out of the Mitchell family, but perhaps because of it. The truth that their rejection had freed me to become someone they couldn't have imagined. Outside, the cool evening air filled my lungs as I spotted Michael waiting by his car as promised. His concerned expression softened when he saw me. "How did it go?" he asked, opening the passenger door. I took one last look at the gleaming hotel where the remains of my former family were likely scrambling to control the damage to their reputation. "It went exactly as it needed to," I answered, stepping into my future and leaving the past where it belonged behind me. Michael's car pulled away from the Rosewood Hotel, carrying me from the epicenter of familial earthquake I had just triggered. The magnitude of what had occurred was still settling into my consciousness after 9 years of silence. I had confronted my family not as the rejected, worthless daughter they had discarded, but as a successful woman whose accomplishments they couldn't diminish. "You're very quiet," Michael observed, glancing over with concern. "Are you okay?" I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? The confrontation had been painful and messy, lacking the cinematic clarity of either villainous rejection or tearful reconciliation. Instead, it had been uncomfortably human, my family's naked calculation upon discovering my success, Brittany's unexpected admission of jealousy, the public unraveling of the Mitchell family myth. "I think I am," I finally answered. Not triumphant or devastated, just free. Michael reached across to squeeze my hand. "Freedom looks good on you." In the days that followed, the ripples from the wedding confrontation spread through Boston's medical and social circles. Dr. Winters called to inform me that my parents were managing damage control after videos of our encounter circulated among hospital staff. Several board members had expressed concern about my father's judgment after learning how he had treated his own daughter. "Your parents built their reputation on appearing perfect, Dr. Winters explained. This has complicated that narrative. I took no pleasure in their discomfort. The girl who had left home 9 years ago might have craved such vindication, but the woman I had become understood the emptiness of revenge. Their prestigious careers, their social standing, their carefully curated image all seemed hollow when measured against their fundamental failure to love unconditionally. 2 weeks after the wedding, Stephanie joined me for dinner at my apartment. "So you crashed your sister's wedding, revealed yourself as a secret millionaire, and exposed your family's dirty laundry in front of Boston's medical elite," she summarized with a grin. "Just another Saturday night for Alexandra Mitchell." I laughed to spite myself. "When you put it that way, it sounds like a soap opera." "Life often does," she replied, turning serious. "The question is, did it give you what you needed?" I considered this as I sipped my wine. I think it did. Not because I humiliated them or proved them wrong, but because I finally saw them clearly. They're just people, flawed, insecure people who built their identity around external validation and prestige. And I realized I don't need or want what they have, which is a life measured by others' expectations rather than personal fulfillment, I said. Success without genuine connection. Achievement without joy. The confrontation had crystallized something I had been working toward in therapy for years, the understanding that my family's rejection had wounded me deeply. But their approval would never have healed me. That healing had to come from within, from building a life aligned with my authentic self rather than their prescribed path. In the months that followed, I channeled this insight into action. MedTech continued to thrive, but I delegated more day-to-day responsibilities to my executive team, creating space for meaningful personal projects. The first was establishing the Fresh Start Foundation, which provided scholarships and mentoring to students rejected by their families for educational or career choices. "I can't change what happened to me," I explained to the board when we launched the foundation, "but I can help others avoid that painful path." The foundation quickly attracted support from unexpected quarters. Several prominent physicians, including some who had witnessed the wedding confrontation, became donors and mentors. Dr. Winters joined our advisory board, bringing valuable connections throughout the medical education system. "Many doctors have children who don't want to follow in their footsteps," he confided. Your story resonated more widely than you might imagine. The work was deeply fulfilling. Each scholarship recipient represented a young person who wouldn't have to choose between authentic self-expression and family support. We provided not just financial assistance, but comprehensive emotional resources, including therapy and community building. I became the mentor I had needed when my own family cast me out. 6 months after the wedding, I received an unexpected email from Brittany. The subject line read simply, "Can we talk?" We met at a quiet cafe in Cambridge. Neutral territory far from Beacon Hill. My sister looked different from the radiantly confident bride I had last seen, more subdued, with less perfect makeup and a simpler hairstyle. "James and I are separating," she announced without preamble. "He says he can't be with someone who would participate in the kind of emotional abuse our parents inflicted on you." I hadn't expected this. "I'm sorry, Brittany. That wasn't my intention." "I know," she sighed. "It's not your fault. Meeting you at the wedding. Seeing what you've accomplished despite our family's rejection, it forced him to reevaluate who I am. Who they are. Who we all are." She stirred her untouched coffee. "He's right, you know. I was complicit. I watched them tear you down for years, and I never objected because it elevated my position." Her honesty surprised me. We were both children shaped by their expectations. I offered. "You followed the path of least resistance. Most people would. But you didn't," she countered. "You had the courage to be yourself, even at tremendous cost." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I admire that more than I can express. It wasn't an instant reconciliation. Trust, once shattered, doesn't reassemble easily. But it was a beginning, a tentative bridge across 9 years of silence. We agreed to monthly coffee meetings, a careful reconstruction of sisterhood without the toxic family dynamics that had originally poisoned it. My parents proved less capable of genuine change. When their attempts to publicly reclaim me as their daughter failed, they retreated into familiar patterns. My mother sent an elaborately worded non-apology. "We only wanted what was best for you," even if our methods were imperfect. My father offered to put the unpleasantness behind us with no acknowledgement of the harm done. I maintained polite distance, responding to their overtures with cordial but firm boundaries. The desperate need for their approval that had once defined me had finally dissolved, replaced by the quiet confidence of self-acceptance. 3 years after the wedding confrontation, my mother was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. Despite our strained relationship, Brittany called to inform me. "She's asking for you," my sister said quietly. "The doctors give her less than 6 months." The decision to visit was difficult. Dr. Lawson helped me navigate the complex emotions involved. "Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation," she reminded me. "You can release your anger without resuming a relationship that was harmful." I ultimately decided to see my mother once, not out of obligation but compassion. The imperious Dr. Diana Mitchell had been reduced by illness to a thin, jaundiced shadow in a hospital bed. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, her life ending in the medical setting she had revered, while I entered as a successful outsider to the profession she had insisted was the only worthy path. "You proved me wrong," she admitted, her voice weakened, but pride still evident. "I didn't think you could succeed without us." It wasn't the heartfelt apology I might once have craved, but it was perhaps the most honest acknowledgement she was capable of giving. I accepted it as such. "I succeeded because of who I am," I replied gently. "Not because of or in spite of the Mitchell name. We didn't achieve miraculous deathbed reconciliation, but we did find a measure of peace. I forgave her not because she deserved it, but because carrying resentment had become more painful than releasing it." When she passed 2 months later, I attended the funeral alongside Brittany. Accepting condolences from the medical community that had once been my expected home, but now intersected with my life on my own terms. Life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Michael and I married in a small ceremony attended by the family we had chosen, Stephanie, Professor Williams, colleagues who had become friends, and scholarship recipients from the foundation who had become like younger siblings. Brittany came alone, our relationship still healing but genuine. MedTech expanded internationally. And I accepted speaking engagements to share not just business insights, but life lessons about authenticity and resilience. I never publicly disparaged my family, but I didn't hide my story either. It had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. The greatest freedom, I told graduates during a commencement address, comes not from proving others wrong, but from releasing the need for their validation altogether. Success isn't measured by titles, wealth, or status, but by the courage to live authentically even when doing so comes at great cost. Looking back on the journey from that devastated teenager leaving home with a single suitcase to the woman I had become, I realized the painful truth that had taken years to fully accept. My family's rejection, while traumatic, had ultimately freed me to discover my authentic self. Had they accepted my choice to study business, I might have spent a lifetime seeking their approval, measuring my worth through their narrow lens. Instead, their complete abandonment forced me to build from scratch, not just a career or financial security, but an identity based on self-acceptance rather than external validation. The family I had created through friendship, love, and mentorship offered something my biological family never had: unconditional support for my authentic self. This is the story I share with you today. Not one of revenge or vindication, but of the harder, more meaningful victory of self-reclamation. If you're watching this and feeling rejected, underestimated, or forced to choose between authenticity and acceptance, know that the path of true self is always worth the journey, however difficult. Have you ever had to choose between being true to yourself and pleasing others? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more authentic life journeys. Remember that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's the people who love us for exactly who we are. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to write your own story, regardless of who tries to edit it.